Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. We're going to get started with the program. If you can find a seat, and we will go through our usual routine. I want to welcome you to the League of Women Voters Lunch and Learn meeting. My name is Beverly Bean. I'm president of the League this year. We are very lucky to have in this League some of the most active and well-informed people in the community. And two of them will be our speakers for today. The subject is the water issue on the Monterey Peninsula, and the title is Getting Beyond Stalemate. Our first speaker will be Janet Brennan. Janet is an environmental planner with 30 years' experience working in local and regional governments. Her experience includes air quality, land use, water quality, infrastructure, hazardous waste planning, and environmental review. She has been active in public interest and community groups since the 1960s. She is currently the Natural Resources Chair on the Board of Directors of the League of Women Voters of the Monterey Peninsula, and is a land use consultant for the California League of Women Voters. Her previous activities, she has served as president of this league and of the League of Women Voters of Ventura County. She is on the board of Landwatch Monterey County. Janet has served on grand juries in both Ventura and Monterey counties, and on and on and on. She is the author of numerous publications on land use and planning, and she has a BA in political science from UC Berkeley. She's on the board of Chamber Music Monterey Bay, and she is a well-known local watercolorist and fine artist. Janet, come on up. I'd like to go ahead and introduce George Riley right now, although he will be speaking after Janet. George grew up on the East Coast. He has a bachelor's from Allegheny College in Pennsylvania. He's a U.S. Navy veteran and served as a communications officer on the USS Beetlejuice and as public information officer for Service Force Atlantic in Norfolk, Virginia. He has his master's from the Wharton School in Philadelphia, University of Pennsylvania, my alma mater as well. I didn't know that, George. And 29 years in local government, including assistant business administrator in Bethlehem, PA, director of a local poverty program in Redwood City, and worked in San Mateo County as assistant to the county manager and director of housing and community services. George is the co-founder and convener of the Citizens for Public Water in 2005, an activist network on local water issues, intervener with the PUC, also active in the League of Women Voters, where he is currently the government director and has been the natural resources director. He's in the Green Party, the Peace Coalition, and the new local chapter of Alliance for Democracy. I forgot to mention that both George and Janet were involved in the REPOG process from the beginning, which they will tell you more about. George is also an artist, yes. Currently is involved with the Monterey Peninsula Art Foundation Co-op Gallery on Cannery Row, where he sells his work. George, come on up. You're going first.
Well, I'm going to go first, and this will be lots of lessons for the woman who is working on a paper of water and conflict. I am going to address lessons learned, hopefully, from the many years that we have been trying to develop an alternative water supply on the Monterey Peninsula. The efforts leading to the now defunct regional project extend back to 1998 when the legislature passed AB 1182, requiring the CPUC to prepare a long-term contingency plan, which was called Plan B. What have we learned in the last 14 years? There has been a lack of transparency. Ratepayers were not directly represented. The Monterey Peninsula Water Management District was systematically excluded from the process. Early warning signs were consistently ignored, And finally, alleged conflicts of interest began unraveling the project. Lack of transparency. The CPUC set the stage for an obscure and opaque planning process by designating itself as the lead planning agency for the EIR for the regional project. This was not established in legislation. It was something the CPUC decided to do itself.
Jenny, could you, there's a lot of initials, could you spell out what those initials are?
I will try to remember to do that. By assuming this role, the California Public Utility Commission took on a responsibility it seldom performs, that of lead agency in a local planning process. The California Public Utility Commission had never before prepared an EIR for a water project. Anyone who has attempted to participate in the PUC planning process faces obscure and legalistic procedural requirements that are daunting. Even though 2 commissioners and an administrative law judge held public hearings here in the peninsula, the final decision approving the regional project was made in San Francisco by 5 unelected representatives. The process was compounded by secrecy in preparing the settlement and purchase agreements among the 3 parties to the regional project. When the project began to unravel in 2011, the 3 parties again conducted secret meetings in an attempt to untangle commitments made in their various agreements. Now, part of the requirement of the PUC process was to have these agreements negotiated behind closed doors, so it's something that was inherent within the process. Local governments took the CPUC's lead by participating in their own less than transparent process. For example, in March of 2009, a meeting of regional project proponents, including peninsula mayors, met at 7 p.m. in Seaside after a minimum 72-hour notice. The meeting, touted as historic, was attended by 2 attendees from the public, George and myself. And we only heard about it indirectly. It was at this meeting that the agencies agreed to implement the regional project. In 2011, the peninsula mayors began to confer their self-imposed condition of a confidentiality agreement, which some have called not to be legal. The ultimate outcome of these meetings was the formation of the Water Peninsula Regional Water Authority, the JPA. The proposal was released with less than 1 week for public review prior to the City of Carmel's approval. The rest of the cities ultimately fell in line. One of the stated purposes of the new agency is to increase transparency, something of an irony given the origin of the organization. Second major issue is ratepayers were not directly represented, and the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District was consistently excluded from the project. Ratepayers had no direct representation under the governance structure of the regional project, even though CalAm ratepayers would have ended up paying most of the bill. The Monterey Peninsula Water Management District, the one agency representing ratepayers, was systematically excluded from the start of the process. In 2004, CalAm and Monterey County Water Resources Agency proposed a desal plant at Moss Landing. Missing was consideration of the Water District's desal proposal. From 2005 to 2007, the Monterey County Water Resource Agency led a managers working group to develop a long-term regional urban water supply in response to the Moss Landing proposal. Little is known about this group. What we do know is that it ultimately morphed into the regional project in 2007. The regional project excluded the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District from the governance and management structure, and once again, the Water District desal plant was excluded from consideration in the final EIR on the Coastal Water Project. Exclusion of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District continues today with the formation of the Mayor's Joint Power Agency, although some lip service is given to the district's participation. The usual complaint is that the district hasn't done anything to produce water since its formation, or its board uses water to control growth. These reasons are in fact a statement about the voters who have consistently turned down the district's and CalAM's projects. The district is statutorily given the role of water supply planning in the peninsula. Unfortunately, it seems certain that the district has been and continues to be excluded from water planning and managing, perhaps because the district typically requires public participation, specifically voter approval. Speaking of the growth issue, one thing the Public Utility Commission did get right was to require a no-growth project for the Monterey Peninsula, leaving the growth issue to future decisions. There is speculation that one of the goals of the Mayor's Joint Powers Agency is to include a growth increment in a future project. Providing water for legal lots of record remains to be determined and is maybe under consideration. While this may seem like a reasonable request, any of those of you who have participated in the general plan process in Carmel Valley know that the county does not know how many legal lots of record it has. The estimate for Carmel Valley range between 100 or 200 and 1,000. And basically, if it is decided to include a growth increment for legal lots of record, it will require the county to expend considerable funds to find out just how many lots we're talking about. Furthermore, the growth issue could face legal challenges which would delay meeting our water quality problems significantly. There were early warning signs in this process that were consistently ignored. Significant stumbling blocks to implementing the regional project were identified very early in the process. The project did not have water rights to extract water from the Salinas Valley groundwater basin. This was challenged as far back as 2006. But the EIR basically said, let's defer this until a later time, which seems kind of not consistent with a judicious moving ahead of the process, since water rights would be fundamental to whether or not the project could go forward. And the recent decision by Judge Lydia Villarreal really focuses in on the water rights issue, basically said the project did not have water rights, and furthermore said that, bought the argument of the Ag Land Trust that there are no water rights in a basin that is overdrafted. And we all know that the Salinas Valley groundwater basin has been overdrafted for well over 60 years. The project may have violated the prohibition against extracting water from the Salinas Valley groundwater basin. In an effort to avoid the exportation issue, desal water was to be divided between Marina, which is in the Salinas Valley groundwater basin, and the peninsula, based on the percentage of fresh water and seawater and the source water pumped from the basin. This assumption in the EIR was that 15% would be feedwater and the fresh water, and the rest would be seawater. Under this ratio, adequate water could be provided to the peninsula. However, the EIR indicated that after 10 years, up to 40% of the water could have been fresh water. In that particular instance, it would have been impossible to meet the water demands of the Monterey Peninsula, because 40% of the water would have had to have been retained within the Salinas Valley groundwater basin. The Superior Court also held that the California Public Utilities Commission was the wrong lead agency under the California Environmental Quality Act. This, of course, was challenged early on in the process by the Ag Land Trust. And that challenge was upheld by the Superior Court in its recent decision. Finally, the Division of Ratepayer Advocates consistently challenged the project's high costs, lack of cost controls, and limited requirement for limited representation for the ratepayers, which would bear all the risk and responsibility for the project. The last major issue, which we're all familiar with, is the conflicts of interest. We are all aware the regional project began to unravel with a revelation that one of the project's most vocal proponents, longtime Monterey County Water Resource Board member Steve Collins, was paid $160,000 by water consultant RMC during the year that RMC secured a $28 million contract to manage the project. Collins has since been charged with 2 felony conflict of interest charges and 31 counts of grand theft by the Monterey County District Attorney's Office. The California Political Practices Commission is investigating conflicts of interest related to the regional project and has yet to complete its investigation. In conclusion, all but a very few local leaders ignored issues of transparency, exclusion of the water management district, lack of ratepayer representation, and the early warning signs and activity and the early warning signs. And the majority of local decision makers actively supported the regional project. Some of these issues are still with us today, even though Cal-Am has pulled the plug on the regional project. Let it be said, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Hopefully, we can move forward effectively and quickly by avoiding the pitfalls of the past 14 years.
Good morning, Monterey. I'm optimistic. For a number of reasons. AT&T is probably not going to have rain this week. Somebody must have been praying. But we got to pray for rain sometime, so pray after this, and maybe that'll work too. This is a community problem, not a problem with the experts. And I think what happened with the REPOG process is that we felt gave too much leverage to the experts and didn't have an organized and effective way of wading in as a community. But I think that there's a new page. We're starting a new page. I think we're going back to the future, as I kind of refer to it. REPOG started out. The REPOG process started out. This is 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. REPOG was the planning process that Jan was just talking about that led to the regional desal project, that led to a number of complications. But REPOG, that was just a planning process. That's what it was, a planning process. But they started out talking about low-hanging fruit. And then, which means in water parlance as we were using it, what are the easy projects to start? What are the least costly projects to start? Where do we already have expertise in place? And what projects can we bring forward that will provide a certain answer to the CDO, the order to reduce our take from the Carmel River? And those projects were, and then you round out that whole equation with desal. That was the idea, and that was where it started. In probably 6 months or so, we had some good discussions on that. But then somehow it got converted or diverted to desal only, largely. There were a few pieces of the other lower cost projects in the proposal, but it's almost like window dressing, because they were not substantive enough in my expectation, at least, of where we're going to go on the water supply. But let me get to why I say good morning, Monterey. I think there's good news out there, and I think there's good opportunities out there. And I think it's an opportunity to start over with a fresh look, but there's some principles involved, and they all make sense to me. And I hope when you go away, they'll all make sense to you. But what I've prepared is this little blue thing, and on one of them it has a list of acronyms. It's on page 2, those of you who struggle with that. I'll try to not get trapped in those. And I'm not trying to make my case and have you understand the data. I'm trying to give you the data so that those of you who want to spend more time with it, or if you want to give this to somebody else to say, you, my neighbor who knows everything, look at this and see if you can understand it, and if you can, then maybe some of it will make sense to you, and maybe you might learn something. That's what I hope people do, is they learn something from this. But the latest information that's, that we're dealing with now is that Cal-Am pulled the plug, and there is no regional desal project in place anymore. It is done, it's killed, it's gone. The PUC hearing a week ago had a review of what the status was, and the administrative law judge there said, I'm not here to rescue the regional desal project. I'm here to find a process or a project or a series of projects, she made it very clear, plural, series of projects that can meet the water supply problem on the Monterey Peninsula. The Marina Coast Water District was represented there with an attorney. They made a big plea to reinstate and rescue as much as they could of the regional desal project. The administrative law judge said, we're not here to do that. So I think that was the last yell for the regional desal. What also happened is that at that same hearing, the administrative law judge told Cal-Am 2 things. One, I want a report in 30 days on the status. I don't know what's in there, but it's going to be an update. So that's due around the 1st of March. And it'll be interesting to see what they say, but it's just an update. It's not a plan. But 90 days, this is what Cal-Am volunteered, and the judge agreed. In 90 days, which is the 1st of May, Cal-Am is expected to present a new application, a whole new process, with its plan for the water supply. Now, Cal-Am's in a as much as Water Management District is in a key position, the mayor's group may be in a key position, others may be in a key position. Cal-Am is by far the major player here, and what they say is going to get traction, at least in the debate. It's going to be their agenda. What we need to do is make sure the community side of all this equation is part of the Cal-Am plan. We have very little time in order to do this. If Cal-Am volunteered a week ago, in 90 days we can come with a plan, and we'll present this to the PUC. If Cal-Am said that last week, they must have a lot of ideas on what they think can go into this plan already. I'm not saying it's pinned down, but my guess is they have a lot of things they're willing to work on right now. Time is very short. As much as I want to make an argument, we have time to make some better decisions, and we have time to put a better plan together. The time is very short in terms of getting at least a mix or an idea or kind of an outline of what the plan ought to look like. And tomorrow, by the way, the Mayor's Joint Powers Agreement is having their first meeting. It's largely an organizing meeting, and hopefully there will be more transparency on a lot of issues, but I don't know what they're going to discuss. I don't know what their agenda is. What I'm hoping is this is on their agenda, some of the proposals that I'm trying to make. So we have the Mayor's JPA in place, but the Superior Court decision that Janet talked about has huge implications for Cal-Am's plans. Cal-Am had been coasting along. I use my terms loosely there, but Cal-Am has been under some impression that with the regional desal project was killed, they put out their alternatives report, which is about 6 weeks, 2 months ago, no more than that now, it's in October, where they had 11 alternatives. Cal-Am, with running a desal project, was in most of those alternatives. But Cal-Am now has to go back to page 1 on their whole process for the regional, for a desal of any kind in the marina area. I think they're going to have a big problem getting a desal project on schedule, the way we've looked at the schedule. I just think there are huge implications and huge problems, huge hurdles that Cal-Am has to deal with in order to go forward. So it's not a slam dunk. It is not a slam dunk for Cal-Am to come up with any size desal, even if it's 2,000 acre-feet, small, large, something else. It's not a slam dunk for that to happen. The conservation. So let me just tell you a little bit of what my research has been telling me. I've gotten the. This is my page 2 document for anyone who wants to try to refer to it. I've been tracking this for some time, and I've been a little disappointed in the conservation success over the past few years. And so I've been assuming that conservation is leveled off. There's not going to be too much more savings on the peninsula. And so whatever the use level, the production level of water, that's the amount that we have to deal with. But the report for last year, the water year that ended in ended in September, has some very interesting numbers. There have been huge new savings on the data. Now, Cal-Am's rate, they started a new rate structure in 2010, and they created some block rates that were doubled. If you were in block 2, and I'm going to make up some numbers, and you paid $14 per acre foot, then and then you used a certain amount, and when you went over that, you paid double that, $28 per acre foot, and then if you went above that, you paid double again, which would be $54. So there was a real motivation to use less water, because you're going to pay for every little marginal as you go into the next. Those tier structure went into operation in February 2010. That was kind of halfway in the mid-year, in the water year, and there was some savings. But then the year after that, the one I'm talking about, is an entire year of those block rates being in effect. And there's been another 5 or 8%, there's been a huge reduction, but from the pattern of use, the trend is now trending down again. I think the block rates tell us a number of things. It's the most recent data available. It ought to be used on everybody's evaluation of where we're going in the future. And we're not hurting. Now, there are arguments about the economy's bad, we don't have the volume of use, and it's been a relatively dry, wet year last year, I guess, so they didn't have to use more water. There are these little marginal arguments being made, but these are real numbers. So, and Cal-Am and the Water Management District and we as planners, we as the community or the mayors or the cities or the Water Management District, whoever's out there who are trying to they ought to use current numbers. That's my principle. It's one of my principles. Use current data. The regional desal project was based on data from 2006. And they were high water years. Cal-Am has a requirement that they need to plan for a 5-year average. Well, if you have a 5-year average going from 2006, and it's going back to 2004, 3, 2, those were high water years, and so the average that they're required to deal with is a high number. If we use current data, real numbers, real experiences, those numbers are going to come down. Cal-Am has to plan for a lower water supply, which means smaller desal. They've got to. We've got to make sure the current data is in all the plans. The ramp down schedule is another thing that we keep talking about, and 2016 or 2017 is thrown around as the cliff, as a drop-dead date. Campaigns have been run on the fear. A lot of publicity about the issue of the seasonal disorder is fear of rationing. You know, rationing is not something to fear, for heaven's sakes. Rationing is a plan. Rationing is approach. Rationing is a process. But what do you fear? You know, it's like making emergency preparations for an earthquake or a car accident or batteries in your emergency light. It's a plan in case something happens. So the fear that's been presented, I think, is overdone. It is irresponsible, and it's got too much traction. And I think we need to undo that with real data. And all I'm asking is the agencies, the mayors, Water Management District, and others use current data and make sense out of the current data so the community can understand it. Now, 2016, 2017, the real drop-dead date, according to the plan, is 2017. I'm saying that the opportunity for water supply projects to come on board on 2017 is greater than, is dependable enough that you can plan on it. If the State Water Board expects to implement a plan that forces us into rationing, remember, it's not a weather-related rationing, it's not a water-related rationing, it's an administrative decision. It's an administrative drought, is what they would be creating. But you can't tell me that if we have projects on the ground, built pipes being laid, engineers doing work, financing be arranged and implemented. I mean, we got to do some things between then that they will insist that we go into rationing when all these things are happening. Everybody says, oh, we probably will get some movement of those requirements later, but not now. I totally agree with that. Nobody should move any of those deadlines right away. But if we're working forward on a series of projects and there's shovels in the ground, if there's financing, if all these pieces are starting to line up, nobody's going to implement the rationing demands that are now on paper. They will be modified. Everybody says that quietly. They don't say it publicly because it makes everybody kind of think, oh, we got time. We really don't have time. We got to get things started. We don't have time to get things started. We do have time in order to complete them. The rationing, the ramp down issue about reducing supply is twofold. One is on the Carmel River and one is on the Seaside Basin. Both of them have ramp down schedules. I've given a sense of that on the page 3, kind of the upper half of the page, where I show you what the ramp down schedule is for Carmel River, ramp down schedule. You don't need to know the numbers. I'm just trying to tell you where it is if you want the numbers. But at some point, there is a date in 2021 where all the ramp down steps end. But between 2017 and 2021, there's another 2,000 to 2,400 acre feet of water that needs to be provided in the supply stream, whatever that is. So just because you get to 2017 and then there's a big drop off, that's the fear that's being put out by some people. But then you drop down here and then there's a continued ramp down to 2021. So whatever we do in our plan, we got a plan for 2021, not just 2017. So the rush to judgment, the rush to make a decision, the rush to build a big desal, the rush to cover all these bases isn't as serious as they're saying it. And I think we have at least a year extra time to play with. And let's face it, it's not tomorrow. It's still 5 years away. We have time to work out some of these priorities, some of these commitments, and commitments to certain projects, financing for them, and let's get away from the fear factor. Let's deal with real numbers and real possibilities. Now, there's another factor of the data that bothers me immensely. And I go back to fear versus facts is my point. ASR, which is Aquifer Storage and Recovery, which is taking winter runoff, excess winter water off the Carmel River, pumping it over the Seaside Basin, storing it until you need it, but usually it's about a year later or less, and then you take it out. That's an average because you can't predict the weather. You don't know whether you're going to have high rain year or dry year or wet year. You don't know that. But you do know over a period of history, you have some high years and some low years. So you take an average. There's nothing wrong with averages. It's used all the time. And there's nothing wrong with them. The average number that's been out there for some time, doesn't matter what it is, it's an average. The argument you get is, but you can't count on that water because maybe it'll be a dry year. Now, what good are averages if you want to argue the extremes? If you want to argue the extremes, then quit using averages. Then don't you use averages at the same time you're going to argue the extremes. My point to everybody who's trying to plan for this, and my pitch will be tomorrow afternoon, the mayors, you can't have it both ways. Either going to deal with averages and make a plan, and the plan has a legitimate analysis and numbers behind it, or you're going to argue the extremes. And when you argue the extremes, you're no longer arguing the averages. So one's scientific, one's emotional, one's rational, one's ideology. They're trying, this is my perception, they're trying to create margins of extra production in order to have it available for unknown use. I say smoke out all the numbers. I've looked at the numbers around, I can't break out the hospitality industry from others, but I looked at the numbers for commercial. The commercial use of water, the hospitality industry is what I'm talking about. Hospitality industry is a major player in everything around here, and that's good. I think it's good. But they also have a need for water. They promote high-level high-level accommodations. That's a water-rich accommodation, spas and hot tubs and luxurious showers and all that stuff. I don't have any particular problem with that. And some of us may call it waste, but it really gives us a wonderful community here. I mean, we have a great destination point, and we all like being here. I'm not saying we're here for that, but because of that, we can all share a lot of other things. But all I'm saying is, give us a number, because they say we've had a bad economy, we need more desal or water, whatever. Once the economy comes back, we're going to have a need. You can't plan for, I mean, the dry years are bad. We can't have a dry year. We can't have rationing, so on. All I'm saying is, what's your number? What do you want? What's the volume of water that you feel you need? Say something. Don't just try to scare me. Say something. The numbers that I've looked at, they've conserved. They're using less water each year. They're a good player in the conservation plan. And they're at a certain level. But they're saying it's not enough for the future. What is enough for the future? I want to know a number. It's as simple as that. I've come up with a number. They're probably not going to like it. But it's not irrational. And I just say 200 acre feet. But I don't know how you do that. I say if you want it, pay for it. I'd like to add that. That's not exactly a PS, but it's going to turn out to be a PS. Because if they want us to pay for it, I think they should justify it. And I don't mind a justification. It's just, how does this all wash out in the numbers of things? Lots of record is another point that's not mentioned. It's mentioned quietly, it's mentioned sometimes, it's mentioned, but it's not in the plan. What's the number? Janet just mentioned. Is it somewhere between 200 and 1,000? We don't know. What's the number? If you're going to plan for something, get some real numbers in place. I don't mind lots of record. Lots of record may be growth. It may not be growth. It may be infill. It may be the people that are stacked up with remodels and other things too that aren't included in the water plan. But let's include them. What's the number? If the agencies can come up with real numbers and defend them, it ought to be in the plan. And we don't have to solve everything by 2017. We have options about which is the top priority, which is the next priority, the staging of them. We have until 2021 to really meet our full requirement. We have till 2017, I say 2018, because the margin of conservation and the speed at which some of these other projects come online will give us some breathing room. And I want to go to questions in just a second. But the last 2 points I want to make. The excess winter water, we know the technology, we've been doing it, we know the price, we know the cost, we know the problems of implementing it, and we've already been doing it, so it's easy to expand. It's easy to expand, it ought to be expanded, it ought to be committed to, it ought to be a top priority, and we ought to maximize it. That's a slam dunk, it ought to be in my mind. There are a number of people who say, well, it's not a predictable water supply in the dry years. I go back to the averages. Look, we're trying to plan based on averages. We're planning for things that are unknown. Let's make our best guess, but not make every exception you make to some number, which drives the number up. Every exception you make creates a margin for water that's what? Growth, I say. We've been adjusted, we've been accustomed now to talking about a no-growth desal plan. But I don't mind a no-growth desal plan that has some margin for let's round out the community a little bit more and have some margin in there. But what is the margin and what's the justification for it? And I think the community can buy that. But what are the numbers? I keep going back to that. Now, if groundwater recharge has a problem, it's not in the financing, it's not in the technology, it's not in the ability to get it approved and permitted, it's in your brain. The idea of social justice or injustice, where wastewater will be cleaned up, treated in an advanced way, and then put in, that's the plan, treat it to an advanced degree, put it in the Seaside Basin again. By the way, that's your new dam. That is the dam anymore. The dam is dead. The dam on top of the river is dead. But the underground dam is very much alive, and it ought to be used to its maximum. We're now overdrafting the water that's in there now, so that's why the 2021 deadline is related to that overdraft. Hope I don't confuse you. But but the people who have tasted that water, which is wastewater, purified, people who have been to Orange County, people who understand the science, people who follow this, don't have any problems with it. The people who don't understand it, or don't follow it, or have a yuck issue, they'll be opposed to it. Fine, let them be opposed to it. They're opposed out of ignorance. Now maybe, if they learned more and knew more and understood more, maybe they would not be so critical of that water. Every water conference in the United States, probably in the world today, one of their top issues is how do you deal with the water crisis, of course. The number one answer is recycling wastewater. That is on every water conference agenda. It is the water of the future. To the extent that people have yuck factors about it, fine. Just try to understand. All of nature does the same thing. They take all the poo, it goes wherever it goes, it gets come back through the rain, it comes back through, it's been recycled. The water in the Mississippi River, every river, upstream people process their sewage, dump it in the river. Industrial waste, all of it goes into the river. Agricultural runoff goes in the rivers. Some of it's treated, some of it's not. You pull it out downstream, use it. It's our good water, river water. It's our best water. It's the easiest water to get, too, and it's cheapest to get. But we have that process of water that comes onshore, gets dirtied up, moves back into the river. Downstream, again. If we had such a yuck feeling and couldn't stand recycled wastewater, we wouldn't have New Orleans. We almost didn't have it, but not because of this. Point is, it's happening everywhere. It's the water of the future. The technology is there. It can be done. And so, excess river runoff is one option. It's affordable. The advanced treatment of wastewater is another option. Local water. These two agencies, by the way, have been around for a long time. This is a water management district related to ASR, the excess river runoff, and CalAM. They've been working together on this. The agency that does the wastewater treatment process has been around a long time, and they have a superior track record on everything that they've done. And they have done something with treating water for agriculture use that was studied and studied and studied and studied, and now it's produced one of the richest little agricultural areas in the entire world, which is the patches just around Castroville. And most of that water, it's not all, but most of that water is recycled wastewater. And ag is scared to death of any kind of water that's contaminated, any kind of water. Every time there's an E. coli, every time there's a lettuce call, every time there's a spinach call about something, the first thing they do is, oh, the wastewater treatment plant is messed up. Oh my God. And NBC came out here a few years ago on one and had a whole film crew wanting to say, we're going to get this, we're going to get a real story here. Looked at all the data, talked to all the people, tracked it somewhere else. There wasn't even any evidence. They all run nervous that they're going to find something. They haven't found something, haven't found anything. Crew packed up and went back, no story. The point is it has an excellent track record. Now let me get to the last question. What size desal? Now at a recent discussion that CalAM sponsored, it wasn't open to the public, but some of us who were mouthy enough got into it. And I was lucky to be one of, I think, only 3 private kind of people in it. Everybody else in that meeting were agency elected officials, agency connected staff, the division ratepayer advocates out of CPUC, San Francisco. And a few of us were there. It was an excellent meeting. It was an excellent, excellent meeting. It wasn't open to the public, but I congratulated Cal-Am for calling this kind of meeting and putting things into the debate that nobody was putting into the debate, even though it wasn't public. They did more to kind of educate a whole group of people about what was going on than all the public agencies that have public access laws, Brown Act requirements, access to data, public hearings, all these laws that require the public agencies to do this. None of them have done this. To a certain extent, I think the city of Monterey deserves some credit because with great regularity, they do have these items, water items, on the agenda. And it's a great place to learn what's going on as well. But the question, what size desal? What size desal? If we use current numbers, the starting point is lower. If we use lower cost options that we know can work, and even though there's some averages about how it's going to work, that brings the size of desal down. My numbers, and what I'm trying to show here, is how low you can go and have some reasonable discussion about desal. I can end up with 0, depending on some of the assumptions I make about numbers, or I can end up with somewhere around 2,500, 3,000 acre-feet of desal. Now, if we adopt the process of let's take the less expensive things first, let's use real numbers, let's take the less expensive things, put those as a top priority, we'll round out this equation with desal. I say every desal proponent is in play. Everyone. Cal-Am has no fast track for its marina site. The Deepwater desal doesn't have any fast track. The People's desal, Nader August project, is not on a fast track. They all could be on the same track. That's my point. They all be the Naval Postgraduate School site with the Water Management District. They could all be. What the mayors should try to do is initiate a process that establishes we're going to use real data, current data. We're going to use real estimates on whatever these fudge factors are. We're going to prioritize our scale of let's do the lower cost options first. And we're going to give a lot of muscle and a lot of support to getting those happen. And we're going to evaluate desal. Because I think we have more time than people want to admit. We have time to evaluate the desals. And that's going to be my recommendation to the mayors. Thank you.
I'm sure George could go on for another hour, but I do want us to have plenty of time for questions. Way in the back.
Hi, thank you. I'm Bill Hood, and I do have a question. Both parties spoke about the mayor's JPA. Janet sort of briefly referred to it. George went into more detail and talked about he wants to present numbers tomorrow. Well, I think there's a broader issue. On the Monterey Peninsula alone, we've got 3 water-related agencies with overlapping jurisdiction. If you add Marina Coast, that's a 4th. Plus you got a private utility, Cal-Am. And those agencies and Cal-Am have not shown by their past history that they cooperate very well. And now you throw another government group in relating to water with the mayor's JPA. I think that the broader issue is what should that role be? What is the most effective role that the JPA can function before you start going into details as to what are the numbers with respect to desal or anything else? And I know I have an opinion on that, and I would like to hope that the public would take this opportunity, which may be the only one you have, to speak up, tell the mayors, tell whoever is at the meeting tomorrow night what you think that agency should accomplish.
The question for, as best I can translate it, for our panel is what are the most important things that the JPA needs to be conscious of?
Well, this is part of the problem in the way the JPA was introduced to the public, because the public really never had a chance to weigh in on exactly what the purpose and role of the organization should be. I think in order to avoid duplication of the responsibilities of the other agencies and organizations, the JPA should probably focus on managing the coordinated effort and focus their efforts in that direction rather than getting into funding, which it has the legal authority to do, etc. And if you look at what George described, you have aquifer storage and recovery, which is something that the water district does. You have groundwater replenishment, which Monterey MRWPCA will do. And then we have the desal, which is quite unclear as to who is going to do that. So in terms of managing these three activities, the JPA could be very helpful there. The question really becomes, how do you address the environmental impact of all these three projects if they are being conducted by various agencies? My suggestion is that they move forward with individual environmental impact reports for each of the projects that would prevent litigation from stopping one or the other of the project, but each of these projects address the cumulative impact issue so that that issue is common to all three. So it's a long answer, but I think a coordination of the planning process would be an appropriate role.
Thank you, Janet. Susan?
Just to follow up, Janet, what is the stated purpose of the mayor's JPA?
What is the stated purpose of the mayor's JPA?
Well,
Why did they feel the need to have another agency?
you need to ask Mayor that.
I had a question related to that JPA, and they're talking about transparency, and yet this is the first time I've heard that there's a meeting tomorrow of it. And they do not have an agenda, so how is that transparent?
We do have an agenda.
That also relates to, Robin asks, how are they transparent if their agenda isn't published? And that relates to a question I had. Who can go to the JPA meetings? And also, what about representation for the people who do not live in a city but are served by Cal-Am?
Everybody can go. It's a public body and it's subject to the Brown Act, and there is an agenda. I just actually found out about it yesterday, but anyway, the meeting is tomorrow at 4:30? 4 o'clock?
4 o'clock. At 4 o'clock at the Carpenter Hall in the Sunset Center.
At that time, there will be consideration of adding other jurisdictions to the Joint Powers Agency. As you are aware, the county unincorporated area, which constitutes 1/3 of all of the ratepayers, is not represented in the JPA, and this is going to be under consideration. But that becomes a complex issue as well in terms of voting, et cetera, whether or not county unincorporated participants can be adequately represented by one agency or one representative. So, but these issues will be discussed at tomorrow's meeting.
And I hope lots of you will attend. Other questions? Yes.
I'm an alternate on this mayor's group, and I've seen the agenda, and the only thing they're really going to discuss in the agenda is their bylaws. And then one item is, what do we want to discuss in the future? I was hoping, like you, that they would start right off with unrepresented and a tactical committee to advise them, all these things that each of our councils have asked them to do. But in this first meeting, it's not on the agenda. It's just the bylaws and what do you want to put on the agenda in the future.
Thanks for that information, Libby. Who sets the agenda, do you know?
Well, the first 3 months, the mayor of Carmel is doing it with her staff. What we suggested is that MRWPCA they've been volunteered to be staff for a while, but that hasn't been accepted by the mayors. So they're starting out with the first 3 months Carmel, and then hoping another mayor, I guess, will take it all over, but they need more expertise.
Thank you. Questions? I thought we'd have lots of questions. George, I should have let you go on further. Yes, Roger.
Well, I can add a little bit about the JPA in response to some of the discussion. A few of us went around to several of the city meetings and listened to the dialogue on it. Many of the city council members were as astounded as the rest of the public was when this thing popped up on the agenda. With response to the question, what do we need another water agency for? One of the council members in Pacific Grove said that this reminded him a little bit of that old story about how if the government ran a horse race and one of the horses wasn't running fast enough, they'd put 2 more jockeys on it. But we were assured that, and I would say that the answer to the question, what do they want, depends on whether you believe what you hear or whether you believe what you see. Because if you believe what you see, you would see a JPA that fully empowers this body to build, own, operate, finance water utilities in an area that significantly overlaps the area of another water utilities. And you might be aware that a utility is a natural monopoly and also in some cases protected by law in that capacity. So it does raise some legal questions if they ever tried to exercise that. But the second thing about this, if you believe what you hear, and we've been told by Mayor McLeod and others that all they really want is a have a seat at the table. They want to be able to have a coordinated voice in the important issues. And I suspect that the important issue is one that George touched on at length, and that is the capacity of the system. They want to make sure that there's enough water when the project gets finally planned and committed. I don't blame them for that. I would actually share that too. I understand what George was saying about how you can make it smaller and smaller and smaller, but if we turn on a system that doesn't have enough capacity in the first year, we're all going to be terribly disappointed. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Roger.
I would like to touch on the findings in the judge's decision on the environmental impact report, because this has incredible implications for any desal project going forward. The judge spent most of the order on the water rights issue, but she also found that the requirement of a contingency plan, the prohibition against exporting water outside the basin, the failure to address the brine issue. These issues she all found were inadequately addressed in the environmental impact report. And there are going to be new brine requirements from the state of California. So any desal project moving forward will have to perform a lot more analysis than what was in the document for the Coastal Water Project. And in terms of the water rights issue, there's been discussion of slant wells going out from Marina. Well, the water rights issue may apply to that particular approach as well. So there are a lot of unresolved issues. My final comment is, and I was debated whether I should note this or not, but back in 2009, there was an agreement among all the environmental groups, the major environmental groups in Monterey County, and on an alternative water supply plan. That plan was endorsed by the Sierra Club, the League of Women Voters, Landwatch, Carmel Valley Association, and the North County Neighborhood Group. That was called the Hybrid Regional Plan. And that plan consisted of aquifer storage and recovery, conservation, groundwater replenishment, and a small desal plant.
Yes, Nader.
Good afternoon. I'm Nader Aga. Everybody talking about the water rights. Let's not go very far. Let's look at our Carmel Valley River. Many of us live near or around Carmel Valley River. For the last 40, 50 years, Cal-Am has been taking that water at no cost to it, not whatsoever. The State Water Control Agency stated in 1910 that this water is being taken from the river illegally. Everybody knows what illegal means, stealing. And the law also says no privately owned water company has the right to sell the water for more than it pays for it. Why are they charging us for it? This is like fencing. We have to protect our rights. Not only they have to stop charging us for the water which they are taking from us, they have to refund all the monies which they have taken for the last 40, 50 years. RWE made lots of money before they diverted their interests. They owe us between $400 and $500 million, and you people better protect your water right until Cal-Am, through objections and through whatever it takes to get your money back. And I'm here to help you. And believe me, I will lead the pack to get our money back. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy?
Thank you, Janet and George, for speaking, and thank you, Janet, for bringing up the hybrid plan. That's the real shining star of the land watchers past. That we created that plan, and it looks like that's what's going to happen now in the future. My question is, I recently saw a presentation from Orange County and their groundwater storage program that they do, the wastewater recycling. And they felt like a big component of their success in Orange County was the public outreach and the big PR campaign that they did in front of that project. A similar project was proposed down in San Diego, and it didn't work because they didn't do that PR. I mean, is there any discussion about the way the Water Pollution Control Agency really doing a lot of outreach around that to sort of stymie some of the...
Amy's question is about water recycling, that the success depends on a good outreach program, lots of public education. Has that been discussed locally?
Absolutely. It's a key part. The Pollution Control Agency, and Libby's back here, could add more if she wanted to, but just in December, they decided to, or November, they decided to put this issue on a fast track and to begin to invest a lot more money, a lot more quickly into doing all the work that's necessary to bring this project forward as a legitimate project to be financed and to be part of the water supply answer. And part of it is a serious outreach effort. I don't know the details of it, and I don't know if that's what you're asking for, but yes, they are planning that. And they're opening up a number of tours of their own operation, but that doesn't have the water we're talking about. They have sponsored tours and taken people, I've been down, Janet's been down to Orange County just to actually see their operation and taste it. And a number of you have done the same thing. And I would encourage you to, if you have the opportunity to do that, I've asked them to bring some of that water up here and then just put it in a big jug and then just have people taste it and see what it's like. You're not gonna drop dead from it, I can tell you that. You're not gonna go away sick, but it's a way to test it, your own proof.
Is the local agency doing it?
The local agency, yes, it's the Water Regional. Yeah.
Are they conducting outreach, or they have any plans to conduct outreach?
Yes, they have definite plans, and they've already started.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions? Robin.
I have a question on the PUC process that's going forward, that they have this 90-day window that Cal-Am has said they're going to propose certain projects. Part of it, I would think that part of their proposal is to include like a desal plant that some agency has to create because it has to be a public agency involved for a desal. So is there some coordination going on between some of the public agencies and CalAM to come up with this plan in 90 days?
Question about the CPUC 90-day requirement for an alternative plan. Is there any coordination going on between a public agency which is required to run or to lead this project and CalAM?
Yes and maybe. CalAM has the responsibility to respond to the PUC, and the PUC has its communication directly through CalAM. So when the PUC speaks, they speak through CalAM. It's like I can't talk to Janet, I have to talk to Bev, and she can hear me, but technically I've got to go through. And that's the PUC process, and that's unfortunate. But a positive statement about the JPA, the potential use of the JPA, it has a tremendous potential to bring various elements together and create a rational picture about what the water plan ought to look like, including some ifs, ands, and buts. But if they do that, they will be able to bridge that gap. But I know CalAM's talking to PUC. I know that. I mean, and nobody's trying to hide that fact. It's just that it's not taking place in public. I want to add one other thing, by the way, which in my presentation. Public financing. Public financing has a preferred tax structure, a tax advantage related to people who buy those kind of public bonds. And because of that, because it's a public agency, they have that advantage, and it's lower interest rates. The interest rate difference between a public bond and a corporate bond or private financing for the identical project doesn't make any difference what the size is. If it's $200, $300, $400 million, whatever it is, public financing will shave enormous amounts of costs off of the total cost of the ratepayers. It's a tremendous advantage of every project that can do it. ASR will have public financing because it's sponsored by a local agency. The groundwater recharge will have public financing because it's a local agency. It's a great cost control and a cost reduction measure. Desal, big question mark. How is that going to play out? And it's very possible that CalAM may be going forward with an idea about them being able to do something on their own. Nothing wrong with that, but they'll have private financing. And unless there's public financing for that, then it's a part of the bill that will come back to us that could have been different had there been public financing for whatever the desal is. Now, there are some public agencies, they're all out there. Nader's Project, Deepwater Desal have said we want to work through a public agency structure. So everybody's looking for public financing so far, except CalAM. I don't know CalAM's picture, and they do have a responsibility to bring something forward to the PUC in 90 days. And my concern is what's in that plan and in their interest that does not represent a broader interest of the community. And that's where I think we need to push soon and now and hard for some new numbers and some new appreciation of what the total costs are going to be and how to bring those numbers down.
Any further questions? Yes? No, you can tell me and I'll repeat it.
My question is about how in all these methods of groundwater recharge and the ASR and the quaternary treatment, the recycled water, the transport of all that water, what infrastructure is currently in place for that, what additional infrastructure would be required, and who is going to build and own those pipes? Because, of course, if it's CalAM, we still have to pay, you know, the 10% on top of that, et cetera, et cetera.
Who is going to build and own the infrastructure to bring the water from the Carmel River and from the waste plant? And the concern is if it's CalAM, we'll be paying a 10% premium on that cost.
Yes, you'll be paying 10% or whatever that premium is. It is CalAM's intention to build the pipes and do that part of it. The real question we're talking about is the production of new water. But the transport of water is still CalAM's responsibility, and they will probably be in the lead on every bit of transmission lines to do that. They have a particular project right now to improve. All the water used to come from Carmel River, or I say south to move north. But I know don't hold me to the cardinal points of the compass. But from the Carmel River up to Seaside, and that's the jurisdiction. And all their pumping system and pipes and pressure points and all the regulators they use in order to pump and clean and fix and repair and shut off when they have to, all is basically for water coming from Carmel River going north. Now we're talking about a supply coming from the north to the south. Their piping system is not arranged for that. They can get away with a few things, but the volume of water we're talking about and the reliability of that water supply needs some new pipes. And so Cal-Am has a proposal to do that. So it's $80 million or so. But that's going to be an expense we're going to have regardless of what the solution of supply issues are, because we will be using the Seaside Basin as a reservoir for future water, and water's got to come down and be managed. Cal-Am's got to be able to completely manage water going in both directions.
George, it's my understanding that the Pollution Control Agency would be responsible for transporting the reclaimed water to the Seaside Basin. I know, so that would be a public agency. Also, there are other transmission lines related to taking reclaimed water for landscaping purposes, and a lot of those lines are already in along General. They're the blue ones. That means that's reclaimed water. That water is used for landscaping, and that was done by a public agency as well. So that's separate from the potable water issue.
Sylvia.
I have one question, in that who gave the JPA, the Joint Power Authority, the authority to lead? Is this the lead organization? And because as George tried to pitch your plan out with the use current data, we try to do the hybrid plan. Who are we trying to push? Push to the JPA, or do you have to act and deal with all the organizations that are in this orchestra?
The question is, who gave the JPA the authority, and are they indeed the lead agency, and are they the ones that need to be pushed on all those issues?
Two answers.
Well, the League has consistently advocated that the Water Management District be the lead agency for all of this. And in fact, the Water Management District has produced the only new water, which is the aquifer storage and recovery. It has worked with Pollution Control Agency, encouraging them to move forward on groundwater replenishment, and I understand will assist in some of the financing of groundwater replenishment. And of course, the Water Management District has its own desal proposal that it has been considering, which is near the Naval Postgraduate School. The Water Management District could also team with some of these other groups interested in desal to do that. And from the League of Women Voters perspective, and we've studied water for many, many years, the lead agency should really be the Water Management District, which has the authority, represents all the ratepayers, so that's where the League stands on this particular issue. The Joint Powers Agency, it created its own role and defined its own purpose, and how it will move forward and how successful that will be remains to be seen.
I have a quick comment. The history of water in this community has always been contentious. If the person is still here, the history's on her side for a good paper. And there are people that feel very strongly about this. Some swear by the Water Management District, some swear against the Water Management District. Some love Cal-Am, some hate Cal-Am. It's been our history, and we're kind of divided. I don't know exactly where the dividing line is, but you know, the community is seriously split. Until there's some way to break that logjam, until there's some way to kind of drop some of the old talk and let's talk in a new way, we're stuck. And I welcome the JPA. I don't think it's the greatest thing. I think they've got far too many powers that they created for themselves that I don't think they need. But they may serve the most useful purpose in today's dynamic and in the short range, and that's what I'm hoping for. They have the potential. I don't know where my odds are yet on how far they'll deliver, but they really have the potential for trying to speak for a larger compromise in this community. They don't want to finance, they don't want to build a project. Good heavens, they've got enough to do. But in order to solve this dilemma by bringing different points of view together, I just hope I hope they feel guilty enough to do this. There's been so much secrecy and so much non-disclosure agreements and so many meetings behind closed doors, and nobody knows what's going on. The mediation on the regional desal, nobody knows what's going on. You can hear rumors, but you don't know what's going on. You can talk directly to the people involved, and they won't tell you things. But I hope they're so guilty about the lack of public dialogue on this issue, and it's the most pressing public issue in this peninsula, has been for several years, if not several generations. But now's crunch time, and I hope they feel so guilty about the non-disclosure history that they have, that they open up this thing as far as they possibly can and hear from a whole variety of cross-section of people and do it on a fast track because we don't have a lot of time. It's just talk at this point, but it's going to ultimately be a plan. And if they can come together with some pieces of this thing that represent a compromise, it's our hope for going forward quickly. If this doesn't work, we're going backwards, not forwards.
We'll end on that. George's plea for transparency, as the League does also. Let's have it transparent, JPA.